Tanker trucks transport tens of tons of CO2 for distances up to 200 to 300 kilometers. For the millions of tons of CO2 per year associated with carbon capture, pipelines are the preferred mode, with ship transport a possible alternative under certain circumstances. There are over 6,000 kilometers of CO2 pipelines installed in the United States to support enhanced oil recovery operations. To ensure single-phase flow and to maintain high densities in the pipeline, the pressure is kept above the CO2 critical pressure of 73.9 bar. To protect against corrosion, water is removed to keep its concentration less than 50 ppm. Pipeline transport scales well. Doubling the pipe diameter increases the pipeline capacity by a factor of 4. A 45-centimeter diameter pipe can transport 10 metric tons of CO2 per year for a cost of about $1 per ton of CO2 per 100 kilometers. By comparison, transport of small quantities in tanker trucks will cost about $7 per ton of CO2 per 100 kilometers. Ships, like tanker trucks, transport CO2 as a refrigerated liquid under pressure. As discussed in Chapter 3, this is because CO2 does not exist as a liquid at atmospheric pressure. Typical conditions for the small quantities of CO2 transported today are negative 20 degrees Celsius and 20 bar. For the larger quantities that will need to be transported for CCS, transport conditions will be closer to negative 50 degrees Celsius and 7 bar. For shipping large quantities of CO2 over distances of hundreds of kilometers or less, ship transport will be more expensive than pipelines. However, at longer distances, ship transport can become competitive. Situations that require flexibility may also favor ship transport. For example, Norway is considering developing a storage facility in the North Sea that would accept CO2 from numerous sites in several countries. They are planning to use ship transport, not pipelines, because it gives them more flexibility in the development of this project. Geologic storage. The Permian Basin in West Texas is the major oil-producing region in the United States. Oil fields that have been producing crude oil for decades slow down and produce less oil each year, but a large fraction of the original oil remains trapped in the pores of the rock. To continue extracting more oil from these existing reservoirs, the oil industry is always trying to develop enhanced oil recovery, EOR, technologies. One such EOR technology, CO2 flooding, was first used in 1972 in Scurry County, Texas. CO2 injected into the oil reservoir helps mobilize the trapped oil so it can flow to a production well. Eventually, the CO2 will break through and flow up a production well, where it will be separated from the oil for reinjection into the reservoir. Today, the Permian Basin has over 70 CO2 EOR projects and is crisscrossed by over 4,000 kilometers of CO2 pipelines. Oil field operators purchase and inject tens of millions of tons of CO2 a year. The Permian Basin is by far the world's largest collection of CO2 EOR operations because they have access to cheap CO2 from natural reservoirs. Most gas reservoirs are primarily methane, with varying amounts of other gases, including CO2. In the western United States, there are a number of large gas reservoirs that contain nearly pure CO2, including Bravo Dome in New Mexico and McElmo Dome and Sheep Mountain in Colorado. Pipelines bring the CO2 to the oil-producing fields of the Permian Basin. It is this cheap CO2, generally delivered for under $20 per ton of CO2, which makes these EOR operations successful. Additionally, as will be discussed in the next chapter, some anthropogenic CO2 sources using carbon capture feed their CO2 into this pipeline network to help meet the growing demand for CO2 EOR. Using CO2 to help produce CO2-emitting oil will not solve the climate change problem by itself, but it has made significant contributions to CCS.